The morning mist hung low over Camp Redstone as Lieutenant Aria Voss stepped through the main gate, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a nervous smile playing at her lips. To the sentries checking her credentials, she appeared to be exactly what her paperwork claimed. A 23-year-old communications specialist from Denver, fresh out of technical training and utterly unprepared for the harsh realities of marine life. Her slight frame, barely 5'4", and weighing maybe 125 pounds soaking wet, seemed almost comical against the backdrop of the sprawling military installation where America's finest warriors trained for combat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What those sentries and everyone else at Camp Redstone didn't know was that the anxious young woman clutching her transfer orders was actually one of the most lethal operatives the military had ever produced. Aria's real name was classified. Her true background was buried so deep in Pentagon files that only 3 people alive knew the complete story. For the past 6 years, she had been part of an experimental program so secret that it didn't officially exist. Project Nightingale, an initiative designed to create deep cover operatives capable of infiltrating hostile organizations by appearing completely harmless. While other elite units trained soldiers to look dangerous, Project Nightingale had trained Aria to look defenseless. The irony was almost perfect. Here at Camp Redstone, surrounded by Marines who prided themselves on being the toughest fighters in the world, walked a woman whose unassuming appearance concealed combat skills that would make Navy SEALs look like weekend warriors. She had mastered 17 different fighting disciplines, could disable armed opponents in seconds, and had completed missions in 12 countries without ever being suspected of being anything more than a lost tourist or confused civilian. As Aria approached the administration building, she carefully maintained the slightly overwhelmed expression she had perfected over years of fieldwork. Her shoulders curved inward just slightly. Her steps were a fraction shorter than her natural stride, and her eyes darted around with the wide-eyed uncertainty of someone completely out of their element. Every gesture was calculated to reinforce the image of vulnerability that had kept her alive through operations in Bangkok, Beirut, and Berlin. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground where Marines were conducting their daily physical training. Aria watched them through the windows of the admin building, powerful men and women executing crisp movements with the precision that came from endless repetition and unwavering discipline. In 36 hours, 8 of these Marines would make the mistake of their lives by assuming that the nervous new communications specialist was exactly what she appeared to be. But that confrontation was still ahead of her. For now, Aria had to focus on establishing her cover identity and beginning the mission that had brought her to Camp Redstone. Intelligence had detected suspicious activity surrounding the base's new quantum encryption project, technology so advanced that its compromise could shift the balance of global military power. Someone was stealing classified information, and traditional security measures had failed to identify the source. That's where Aria came in. Her assignment was to infiltrate the communications department, gain the trust of the personnel with access to the quantum project, and identify the security breach. It was exactly the kind of mission Project Nightingale had designed her for, a job that required someone who could become invisible by being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. As she completed her paperwork and received her temporary quarters assignment, Aria mentally reviewed the cover identity she would maintain over the coming weeks. Communications Specialist 3rd Class Aria Voss from Denver, Colorado. Father was a mechanic, mother worked at a grocery store. Graduated from a community college with average grades in computer science. Joined the military to pay for further education and see the world. nervous around authority figures, prone to making minor mistakes when flustered, but generally competent at technical tasks. It was the perfect profile for someone who would be ignored by most Marines, protected by a few sympathetic ones, and trusted by everyone as completely harmless. The persona had been crafted based on years of psychological research into how military personnel categorized and dismissed certain types of people. Aria could become virtually invisible by embodying exactly what these warriors expected from a scared civilian trying to play soldier. Walking across the base toward her assigned barracks, Aria passed groups of Marines who barely glanced in her direction. When they did notice her, their expressions showed exactly what she had hoped to see, a mixture of protective amusement and professional dismissal. To them, she was just another support specialist who would need looking after until she either adapted to military life or washed out entirely. None of them suspected that the fumbling communications specialist had once eliminated an entire terrorist cell in Prague using nothing but improvised weapons and psychological manipulation. None of them knew that her allegedly nervous habit of fidgeting with her equipment was actually a constant assessment of potential weapons and escape routes, and certainly none of them imagined that within 2 days, their casual dismissal would lead to the most shocking demonstration of combat prowess in Camp Redstone's history. As the sun climbed higher over the Virginia mountains, Aria Voss completed her first day of integration into life at Camp Redstone. She had successfully convinced everyone she encountered that she was exactly what she appeared to be, a slightly overwhelmed young woman who would need protection and guidance to survive in their world. She had no way of knowing that Sergeant Blake Morrison and 7 of his fellow Marines had already noticed her and decided she needed to learn some hard lessons about military life. Their plans for her education would trigger a 45-second encounter that would expose one of the military's most classified programs and transform Aria from invisible operative to the most famous soldier in America. But for now, she simply looked like a lost girl trying to find her place in a world of warriors, exactly as she had planned. 3 weeks into her assignment at Camp Redstone, Aria Voss had become exactly what she'd intended to be: forgettable. She moved through the communications center like a shadow, her presence so unremarkable that seasoned Marines would forget she was in the room within minutes of her arrival. Her desk, positioned in the corner near the backup servers, might as well have been invisible for all the attention it received. Every morning at 0630 hours, Aria reported to the communications bunker beneath Building C, where she performed routine maintenance on encryption devices that connected Camp Redstone to military installations worldwide. Her supervisor, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, had quickly categorized her as technically adequate but lacking confidence, exactly the assessment she had worked to cultivate. Voss, Rodriguez would call out each morning, his tone carrying the patient exasperation of a man dealing with someone slightly out of their depth. "Did you complete the diagnostic on the satellite uplinks?" "Yes, Sergeant," Aria would respond, her voice carrying just the right note of uncertainty. "Though I'm not entirely sure about the calibration readings on Unit 7. They seem within parameters, but—" She would trail off, allowing him to fill in the blanks about her supposed technical insecurity. Rodriguez would nod, make a note in his log, and move on to more pressing matters, never suspecting that Aria had not only completed the diagnostics with precision that exceeded his own capabilities, but had also identified and documented 3 separate vulnerabilities in the base's communication systems that could potentially be exploited by hostile intelligence services. The routine was mind-numbing compared to her previous assignments, but it served its purpose perfectly. While her colleagues saw a nervous technician struggling to keep up, Aria was systematically mapping every aspect of Camp Redstone's information infrastructure. She knew which servers contained classified data, which personnel had access to the quantum encryption project, and most importantly, which communication patterns suggested unauthorized information transfer. Her living quarters reflected the same careful construction of ordinariness. Barracks. Room 247 contained exactly what one would expect from a young woman trying to make the best of military life. A few family photos from her fictional childhood in Denver, romance novels that she appeared to read during downtime, and a small collection of stuffed animals that suggested homesickness and emotional vulnerability. The photos were particularly inspired, genuine pictures of a real family in Denver who had been recruited by Project Nightingale and paid handsomely to play their roles as Aria's fictional relatives. The stuffed animals served a dual purpose. They reinforced her image as someone emotionally unprepared for military life, while their hidden compartments contained sophisticated surveillance equipment that would make CIA operatives envious. Aria's daily routine was a masterclass in maintaining deep cover. She woke at 0600, always appearing slightly rushed, as if she struggled with the early military schedule. In the mess hall, she sat alone or with other junior personnel, never inserting herself into conversations with senior Marines who might have access to classified information. Her meals were carefully chosen to reinforce her image. She ate modest portions, occasionally pushing food around her plate as if stress affected her appetite. During physical training, Aria's performance was perhaps her greatest acting achievement. She had to carefully modulate her natural abilities to appear as someone who met minimum fitness standards without excelling. This meant deliberately running slower than her body wanted, performing fewer push-ups than her strength allowed, and showing signs of fatigue at precisely the right moments to maintain credibility. The psychological profile she projected was crucial to her mission's success. Aria had cultivated an image of someone who was competent enough to do her job, but insecure enough to avoid attracting attention. She asked questions that made her seem conscientious but not particularly insightful, made minor mistakes that suggested normal human fallibility, and showed appropriate deference to authority figures without appearing either sycophantic or resentful. Her interactions with male Marines were particularly carefully managed. Aria had learned to project just enough vulnerability to trigger protective instincts without suggesting romantic interest. She would thank them earnestly for small favors, ask for help with tasks she could easily handle herself, and respond to their casual flirtation with shy politeness that discouraged pursuit without causing offense. This delicate balance had worked perfectly for 3 weeks. The Marines at Camp Redstone had collectively decided that communications specialist Voss was a decent kid who was trying her best but would probably never be anything more than adequate. Some found her endearing in a little sister sort of way, others barely noticed her existence, and a few seemed mildly protective of what they perceived as her innocent struggle to adapt to military life. None of them suspected that the fumbling technician who sometimes spilled coffee on herself was actually conducting one of the most sophisticated counterintelligence operations in military history. None of them knew that her apparent difficulty with military protocols was a carefully crafted performance designed to make her invisible to potential security threats. And absolutely none of them imagined that her nervous habit of fidgeting with electronic devices was actually the deployment of surveillance equipment so advanced that it could monitor conversations 3 rooms away. As Aria completed another seemingly routine day at Camp Redstone, she reviewed the intelligence she had gathered through her perfect disguise. The quantum encryption project was indeed being compromised, but the source wasn't a foreign agent or a disgruntled insider, as initially suspected. The security breach appeared to be coming from within the Marine ranks themselves, specifically from a group of junior officers who had somehow gained unauthorized access to classified systems. More troubling, her surveillance had detected patterns suggesting these Marines weren't acting alone. Someone with significant technical expertise was directing their activities, providing them with tools and knowledge they shouldn't possess. The operation was more sophisticated than anyone had realized, which meant Aria's mission was about to become significantly more dangerous. But for now, she remained perfectly invisible, hidden behind a facade of incompetence and vulnerability that had fooled an entire military installation. Tomorrow she would continue her careful investigation, maintaining her cover while gathering the evidence needed to expose the security breach. She had no way of knowing that tomorrow would be the day 8 Marines decided the nervous communications specialist needed to learn what real military discipline looked like. Their plan to toughen her up would shatter her carefully constructed identity and expose capabilities that would shock the entire military establishment. For now, Aria Voss was just another forgettable face in the crowd, exactly as she had planned and exactly as it needed to be. Colonel Marcus Thorne stood at the window of his Pentagon office, watching the steady flow of traffic on the Potomac as dawn broke over Washington, D.C. At 58, his imposing 6'2" frame still carried the unmistakable bearing of a man who had spent 3 decades leading Marines into combat. The Distinguished Service Cross on his uniform told only part of his story. The classified operations in Somalia, Afghanistan, and 3 countries that didn't appear in any official records would forever remain known only to a select few within the intelligence community. His secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message that made him pause his morning coffee. Mockingbird operational, initial phase complete, target environment fully infiltrated, proceeding to Phase 2. Thorne allowed himself a small smile of professional satisfaction. Aria Voss, though that wasn't her real name, had successfully established herself at Camp Redstone exactly as planned. His protégé was proving what he had argued for in classified briefings across 3 administrations, that the right operative, properly trained and positioned, could become completely invisible while gathering intelligence that conventional methods couldn't obtain. Project Nightingale was Thorne's brainchild, born from a career spent watching traditional intelligence operations fail because they relied on agents who looked like agents. After watching countless missions compromised because operatives couldn't blend seamlessly into civilian environments, he had proposed something radically different: create agents who were so perfectly ordinary that they became invisible. The intercom on his desk crackled to life. "Colonel Thorne, General Patterson is here to see you, sir." "Send him in." General William Patterson entered the office with the confident stride of a man accustomed to having his orders followed without question. At 63, his silver hair and weathered face reflected 4 decades of military service that had taken him from the jungles of Vietnam to the deserts of Iraq. Like Thorne, he was a product of the Cold War military, shaped by decades of shadow warfare against adversaries who rarely wore uniforms. "Marcus," Patterson nodded, taking a seat without invitation. "Another success for your Nightingale program. Specialist Voss has completed initial infiltration without raising any suspicions." "Aria performed flawlessly," Thorne replied, using the cover name with practiced ease. "Camp Redstone's personnel have completely accepted her cover identity. As far as they're concerned, she's exactly what she appears to be, a slightly overwhelmed communications technician who's trying her best to fit in." Patterson leaned forward, his expression growing more serious. "And the quantum encryption investigation? Any progress on identifying the security breach?" Thorne pulled up classified files on his secure terminal. More than we initially anticipated. The breach isn't coming from foreign intelligence services as we suspected. It's an inside job, but more sophisticated than a simple case of a disgruntled employee selling secrets. How sophisticated? Someone is running a deliberate operation to steal the quantum encryption protocols, and they're using Marine personnel as unwitting assets. Aria has identified at least 3 junior officers who have been accessing classified systems they have no authorization to use, but they're being directed by someone with significant technical expertise. Patterson studied the intelligence reports Thorne shared. Any theories on who's running the operation? That's where it gets interesting, Thorne said, highlighting specific communication patterns on his screen. The technical signature suggests someone with deep knowledge of military communication systems, not just a hacker or foreign agent, but someone who understands our security protocols well enough to circumvent them without triggering automated alerts. The 2 officers sat in contemplative silence for a moment, both drawing on decades of experience in military intelligence operations. Patterson was the first to voice what they were both thinking. You're suggesting the breach is being orchestrated by someone within our own military structure. It's the only explanation that fits the evidence, Thorne confirmed. The level of access required, the sophisticated understanding of our security measures, the ability to manipulate Marine personnel without raising suspicions. This isn't an external attack. It's an internal operation. Patterson's expression darkened. If you're right, then this goes beyond simple espionage. Someone is using our own people to compromise national security assets. Thorne nodded grimly, which is why Aria's mission has become even more critical. She's not just investigating a security breach anymore. She may be our only way to identify a traitor operating at the highest levels of military intelligence. The weight of this realization settled over both men. They had seen betrayal before, soldiers who sold information for money, officers who cracked under pressure, civilians who were turned by foreign intelligence services. But the systematic compromise of a quantum encryption project suggested something more dangerous, a coordinated effort to undermine American military technological superiority. What are the risks to Specialist Voss? Patterson asked, focusing on the operational implications. Minimal, as long as her cover remains intact, Thorne replied. Her training prepared her for exactly this type of long-term infiltration. She can maintain the communications technician identity indefinitely while gathering the intelligence we need. Patterson studied the personnel files spread across Thorne's desk. You've got quite an investment in this operative, Marcus. 3 years of specialized training, complete identity construction, psychological conditioning for deep cover operations. She represents millions of dollars in development. Thorne's expression softened slightly, revealing a hint of personal connection that he rarely allowed others to see. Project Nightingale isn't just about operational effectiveness, Bill. It's about proving that our intelligence capabilities can evolve beyond traditional parameters. You mean proving that someone who doesn't fit the typical special operations profile can be just as effective as conventional agents? Exactly. Aria demonstrates that the most powerful weapon in intelligence work isn't physical strength or intimidating presence. It's the ability to become so unremarkable that hostile forces never suspect you're there. Patterson nodded slowly, understanding the broader implications of Thorne's program. And if her identity is ever compromised, then we lose more than just an operative, Thorne admitted. We lose proof that this approach can work on a larger scale. The future of intelligence gathering may depend on our ability to create agents who are invisible because they're overlooked, not because they're hidden. Their conversation was interrupted by another encrypted message on Thorne's secure terminal. As he read it, his expression grew concerned. "Problem?" Patterson asked. "Potential complication at Camp Redstone. Aria reports increased attention from a group of Marines who seem to be taking unusual interest in her technical capabilities. They're asking questions about her background and pushing her to demonstrate skills beyond her supposed training level." Patterson leaned forward. "Could they be connected to the security breach?" "Unknown. But if they continue pressing her, she may be forced to break cover to maintain her safety." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either officer. The very invisibility that made Aria such an effective intelligence asset also made her vulnerable to the casual harassment that military environments sometimes fostered. Her cover identity as a nervous, technically adequate communications specialist made her an ideal target for Marines who might decide she needed toughening up through unofficial military discipline. "What are her orders if her cover is compromised?" Patterson asked. Thorne's jaw tightened. "Extract immediately and abort the mission. But losing Aria means losing our only lead on the quantum encryption breach. We'd be back to conventional investigation methods, which have already proven inadequate. And if she's forced to defend herself while maintaining cover? That's the nightmare scenario. Aria's combat training is far beyond anything a communications technician should possess. If she's forced to use it, her cover is blown and the entire operation is compromised." As the morning sun climbed higher over the Pentagon, both officers contemplated the delicate balance their operative was maintaining hundreds of miles away. Aria Voss had successfully infiltrated one of the most secure military installations in the country, established a perfect cover identity, and begun gathering intelligence on a sophisticated security breach. But she was walking a tightrope between maintaining her disguise and protecting herself from Marines who might push her beyond the limits of her assumed identity. Neither Thorne nor Patterson could have anticipated that within hours a group of 8 Marines would make a decision that would shatter Aria's carefully constructed cover and expose Project Nightingale to the entire military establishment. The invisible operative was about to become the most visible soldier in America. The first sign of trouble came on a Tuesday morning when Sergeant Blake Morrison noticed communications specialist Voss struggling with what appeared to be a routine equipment diagnostic. From across the communications center, he watched her fumble with a testing device that should have been second nature to anyone with her supposed training level. What Morrison didn't realize was that Aria was deliberately creating the appearance of difficulty while actually conducting an advanced security analysis that was far beyond the scope of her cover assignment. Morrison was a 12-year Marine veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and earned his stripes through a combination of tactical excellence and an unwavering belief in military discipline. At 34, he carried himself with the confident authority of a non-commissioned officer who had seen enough combat to know the difference between soldiers who could be counted on and those who might crack under pressure. To him, Specialist Voss represented everything that was wrong with the modern military's relaxed standards. Over the past week, Morrison had been watching Aria more closely, and what he observed troubled him. She seemed to lack the confidence and competence that he believed essential for military service. Her tentative approach to equipment, her apparent uncertainty during routine procedures, and her general demeanor suggested someone who was fundamentally unprepared for the responsibilities of her position. What Morrison couldn't have known was that every hesitation he observed, every moment of apparent confusion, was a carefully calculated performance designed to maintain Aria's cover while she gathered intelligence on the quantum encryption project. Her struggle with equipment diagnostics was actually her method of conducting unauthorized deep system analysis without triggering security protocols. During their lunch break at the main mess hall, Morrison gathered 3 of his closest associates to discuss what they had all begun to notice about the new communications specialist. Staff Sergeant Derek Hamilton, a former infantry squad leader with 8 years of service, had similar concerns about Aria's apparent lack of military bearing. Corporal James Wheeler, a communications expert himself, had noticed technical inconsistencies in her work that suggested either inadequate training or deliberate deception. Lance Corporal Ryan Foster, the youngest of the group at 26, had observed her during physical training and believed she wasn't pushing herself to meet proper military standards. "I'm telling you guys," Morrison said, keeping his voice low as Marines moved through the lunch line around them. "There's something off about Voss. She's been here 3 weeks and still acts like she doesn't belong." Hamilton nodded in agreement. "I've seen her type before. Civilian contractor background, probably joined for the benefits, doesn't understand what military service actually means." Wheeler, who worked most closely with Aria in the communications center, offered a different perspective. "It's not just attitude. Some of the work she's doing doesn't match her supposed skill level. Yesterday I saw her complete a diagnostic procedure in half the time it should have taken, then act confused when Rodriguez praised her efficiency." Foster leaned forward, intrigued by this observation. "You think she's hiding her capabilities, maybe trying to avoid getting assigned more difficult tasks? Or maybe she's not who she claims to be," Morrison suggested, voicing a suspicion that had been growing in his mind. "Her service record says she came from technical training in Georgia, but some of the equipment she's working with requires clearances that take months to obtain." The 4 Marines continued their discussion, unaware that their growing suspicion of Aria represented exactly the kind of security threat that Project Nightingale was designed to avoid. Their natural military instincts to question anomalies and investigate unusual behavior was beginning to focus on the one person at Camp Redstone who couldn't afford that kind of attention. Over the following days, Morrison and his colleagues began conducting informal surveillance of Aria's activities. They noted her arrival and departure times, observed her interactions with other personnel, and paid particular attention to her technical work. What they discovered only deepened their suspicions. Aria's daily routine was almost suspiciously consistent, as if she were following a carefully planned schedule rather than adapting naturally to military life. Her interactions with other Marines seemed calculated to avoid forming close relationships that might compromise her operational security. Most troubling to Morrison was her apparent ability to access equipment and systems that should have been beyond her authorization level. Hamilton discovered that Aria had been working late shifts in the communications center, supposedly conducting routine maintenance that didn't require supervisory oversight. Wheeler confirmed that she had accessed servers containing classified information, though always with proper authorization codes that suggested legitimate technical requirements. Foster reported that her physical fitness scores were exactly at the minimum acceptable levels, not below standards, but precisely at the threshold that avoided attracting attention. The picture that emerged from their investigation was of someone who was either remarkably lucky in avoiding scrutiny or deliberately managing her profile to remain unremarkable. To 4 experienced Marines who had learned to trust their instincts about potential security threats, Aria's pattern of behavior suggested something more than simple incompetence or civilian adjustment difficulties. Morrison made the decision to escalate their informal investigation to a more direct approach. Military protocol required that any security concerns be reported through proper channels, but Morrison believed that a preliminary assessment of Aria's capabilities would help determine whether formal action was necessary. He convinced Hamilton, Wheeler, and Foster that they had a responsibility to test whether communications specialist Voss was hiding capabilities that could represent a security risk. Their plan was straightforward: create a situation that would require Aria to demonstrate her actual technical abilities under pressure. If she was indeed hiding advanced skills, the stress of a simulated emergency would likely force her to reveal them. If she truly was the marginally competent technician she appeared to be, the exercise would confirm their assessment and end their suspicions. Morrison coordinated with the duty roster to ensure that he and his 3 colleagues would be assigned to the communications center during Aria's next solo shift. They would present her with a fabricated technical crisis that required immediate resolution, then observe how she responded. Her reaction would tell them everything they needed to know about her true capabilities. What the 4 Marines couldn't have anticipated was that their plan would coincidentally align with a critical phase of Aria's intelligence-gathering operation. She had finally identified the source of unauthorized access to the quantum encryption project and was preparing to download evidence that would expose the security breach. Their intervention would occur at the exact moment when her mission was most vulnerable to discovery. As Morrison finalized their plan during a private meeting in the barracks, 4 additional Marines joined their discussion. Word of their investigation had spread through informal channels, and other personnel had begun sharing their own observations about the mysterious communications specialist. Corporal Anthony Martinez had noticed discrepancies in Aria's stated background during casual conversations. Lance Corporal Stephen Brooks reported unusual patterns in her computer access logs. Private First Class David Chen observed that her reaction times during emergency drills seemed faster than her general demeanor suggested. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres had overheard conversations where Aria demonstrated knowledge of classified procedures that exceeded her supposed clearance level. The group that had begun as 4 Marines conducting an informal security assessment had grown to 8 personnel who shared a collective suspicion that communications specialist Aria Voss was not who she claimed to be. Their military training demanded that they investigate potential threats to base security, but their methods were about to trigger a confrontation that would expose one of the most classified programs in military intelligence. None of them suspected that the nervous technician they planned to test was actually one of the most highly trained operatives in the American military, capable of neutralizing all 8 of them in less than a minute if her cover was compromised. Their investigation was about to collide with 3 years of specialized training that had prepared Aria for exactly this type of situation. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation that would change everything at Camp Redstone. The opportunity Morrison had been waiting for presented itself on Thursday afternoon when Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was called away for an emergency briefing with Base Command. The communications center would be operating with minimal supervision for at least 2 hours, creating the perfect window for their planned assessment of Specialist Voss's true capabilities. Morrison coordinated the timing carefully. He arranged for Hamilton and Wheeler to report for routine equipment checks that would bring them into the communications center during Aria's shift. Foster would arrive under the pretext of delivering updated encryption protocols, while the 4 additional Marines, Martinez, Brooks, Chen, and Torres, would position themselves strategically around the building under various administrative pretexts. What Morrison didn't realize was that Aria had been monitoring their increased attention to her activities for the past 3 days. Her training in counter-surveillance techniques allowed her to recognize the classic patterns of an investigation team gathering intelligence on a target. She had identified Morrison as the primary threat, cataloged the capabilities and personalities of his associates, and developed contingency plans for various confrontation scenarios. The irony of the situation was almost perfect. While Morrison believed he was conducting a security assessment of a potentially dangerous individual, Aria was actually in the final stages of gathering evidence about the real security threat to Camp Redstone. Her analysis had identified unauthorized access patterns that pointed to a sophisticated espionage operation involving at least 3 Marine officers and an unknown external coordinator. Tonight's shift was supposed to be when she downloaded the final proof needed to expose the conspiracy. At 1400 hours, Aria was alone in the communications center when Morrison and Hamilton entered through the main access door. Their arrival seemed routine. 2 senior Marines conducting standard oversight of junior personnel. But Aria immediately recognized the deliberate nature of their positioning. Hamilton moved to secure the exit, while Morrison approached her workstation, both maintaining casual demeanor that poorly concealed their tactical awareness. "Afternoon, Specialist Voss," Morrison said, his voice carrying the authoritative tone of a non-commissioned officer conducting official business. "We need you to run a priority diagnostic on the satellite communication array. There's been reports of intermittent signal degradation that could affect base security." Aria looked up from her terminal, allowing appropriate concern to show in her expression. "Of course, Sergeant. Should I follow standard diagnostic protocols, or are there specific parameters you need me to check?" "That's what we're here to determine," Morrison replied, moving closer to her workstation. "The problem is that standard protocols haven't identified the source of the degradation. We need someone with advanced technical capabilities to dig deeper into the system architecture." The request was clearly designed to pressure Aria into revealing skills beyond her supposed training level. A real communications technician would either follow established procedures or admit that the task exceeded her capabilities. Morrison was betting that Aria would choose a third option that would expose her true nature. Wheeler entered the center at that moment, followed closely by Foster. Their timing was too coordinated to be coincidental, and Aria recognized that she was now facing a deliberate confrontation designed to test her cover identity. Her training immediately shifted into threat assessment mode, cataloging escape routes, potential weapons, and the tactical capabilities of her apparent interrogators. "Sergeant Wheeler, good timing," Morrison said without turning around. "Specialist Voss is about to demonstrate her approach to advanced system diagnostics. I'm curious to see if her methods match her supposed training background." Wheeler positioned himself near the backup terminals, while Foster moved to control the secondary exit. The positioning was professional, not overtly threatening, but clearly designed to contain Aria's movement options. Their military experience was evident in how they established tactical control of the space without making their intentions obvious to casual observation. "Sir," Aria said carefully, "I'm not sure I understand the urgency. Satellite communication diagnostics usually require supervisory authorization for advanced system access. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez didn't mention any priority issues when he briefed me this morning." Morrison's expression hardened slightly. "Rodriguez isn't here, Specialist. I'm providing the authorization. The question is whether you have the capability to perform the task, or if we need to find someone more qualified." The challenge was unmistakable now. Morrison was pushing her toward a decision point where she would either have to admit limitations that might end the confrontation or demonstrate abilities that would confirm his suspicions. Aria's mind rapidly calculated her options while maintaining the nervous demeanor expected from her cover identity. Martinez, Brooks, Chen, and Torres entered the communications center within the next 5 minutes, each arriving under different pretexts but clearly coordinating their presence. The space that had been designed for maybe 3 personnel now contained 9 people, creating an atmosphere of controlled tension that made Aria's situation increasingly precarious. Quite a crowd for a routine diagnostic, Aria observed, allowing a note of nervousness to enter her voice that wasn't entirely feigned. She was genuinely concerned now, not about physical threat. She could neutralize all 8 Marines in less than a minute if necessary, but about maintaining her operational cover while extracting the intelligence she had worked 3 weeks to gather. Standard procedure for priority security issues, Torres replied, though his positioning near the equipment racks suggested something more than casual oversight. We want to ensure proper documentation of any anomalies you identify. Aria recognized that she was running out of time and options. The Marines had created a situation where any response she gave would provide them with information about her true nature. If she performed the requested diagnostics competently, they would know she possessed advanced technical skills. If she refused or claimed inability, they would likely escalate the confrontation to determine why she was avoiding the task. More critically, their presence was preventing her from completing her actual mission. The evidence she needed about the quantum encryption breach was stored on servers she couldn't access, while under direct observation from 8 Marines who already suspected her of deception. Every minute that passed increased the risk that the real security threats would detect her investigation and eliminate the evidence. Brooks moved closer to her workstation, ostensibly to observe her diagnostic procedures, but actually positioning himself to monitor her computer access in real time. Whenever you're ready, Specialist, we're all eager to see how you approach complex technical problems. The 8 Marines had effectively surrounded Aria's position without making their containment obvious. Their body language remained professional, but their eyes showed the focused attention of experienced soldiers who had identified a potential threat and were prepared to respond to any sudden movement or aggressive action. Aria made her decision. She would attempt to complete a basic version of the requested diagnostic while gathering the intelligence she needed, then extract from Camp Redstone using her emergency protocols. It was a calculated risk, but her mission was too important to abandon without obtaining the evidence of the security breach. "I'll need to access the primary satellite interface," she said, reaching for her authorization codes. "The diagnostic will take approximately 20 minutes if we follow proper security protocols." Morrison nodded approvingly, but his expression remained watchful. "Take whatever time you need, Specialist. We want to see your best work." As Aria began typing, her fingers moved with practiced efficiency across the keyboard. She had mere minutes to balance completing her intelligence mission while maintaining her cover identity under the direct observation of 8 suspicious Marines. The next 20 minutes would determine whether Project Nightingale's most successful deep cover operation would end in triumph or catastrophic exposure. The confrontation that would change everything was about to begin. Aria's fingers moved across the keyboard with deliberate precision, each keystroke carefully calculated to maintain her cover while accessing the classified systems she needed. The satellite diagnostic interface appeared on her screen, displaying the complex network architecture that connected Camp Redstone to military installations worldwide. To the 8 Marines watching her every movement, she appeared to be following standard procedures with the nervous competence expected from her cover identity. What they couldn't see was the secondary operation running beneath the diagnostic interface. Aria's real target wasn't the satellite communication array. It was the quantum encryption servers that stored evidence of unauthorized access patterns she had been tracking for 3 weeks. Using techniques that would have impressed Pentagon cyber warfare specialists, she was simultaneously conducting Morrison's requested diagnostic while extracting critical intelligence about the security breach. "Interesting approach," Wheeler commented, leaning closer to observe her screen. His technical background allowed him to recognize that Aria's diagnostic methods were more sophisticated than typical communications specialist training would provide. Those access protocols aren't in the standard manual. Aria maintained her nervous demeanor while her mind raced through tactical calculations. Wheeler's observation was dangerously close to exposing her advanced capabilities, but she needed another 10 minutes to complete her data extraction. "I've been reading additional technical documentation in my spare time," she replied, allowing a slight tremor of uncertainty in her voice. "Sometimes the standard procedures don't provide enough detail for complex problems." Morrison circled behind her workstation, positioning himself where he could observe both her screen and her physical reactions. His 12 years of military experience had taught him to recognize when someone was operating under stress, and Specialist Voss was displaying micro-expressions that suggested intense concentration masked by artificial calm. "Impressive initiative taking advanced study upon yourself," Morrison said, his tone carrying undertones that made it clear he didn't believe her explanation. "Most technicians at your level stick to basic procedures unless specifically trained for complex diagnostics." Brooks had been monitoring the network traffic generated by Aria's activities, and what he observed troubled him. "Sergeant Morrison, the data patterns she's generating don't match standard diagnostic protocols. She's accessing servers that aren't part of the satellite communication system." The observation sent immediate tension rippling through the 8 Marines. Torres moved closer to the exit, while Martinez positioned himself near the emergency communication panel that could summon additional security personnel. Chen and Foster flanked Aria's workstation, creating a containment formation that appeared casual but was tactically sound. Aria recognized that her time was running out. The Marines had identified anomalies in her activities that would soon force them to either escalate their investigation or take direct action to stop her. Her data extraction was 70% complete, but the remaining 30% contained the most critical evidence about the quantum encryption breach. "Sir, I'm following the diagnostic tree that was provided in my technical briefing," Aria said, injecting more nervous uncertainty into her voice, while her fingers continued their complex dance across the keyboard. "If there are servers that shouldn't be accessed, perhaps someone could clarify which systems are off limits for this diagnostic." Hamilton exchanged glances with Morrison, recognizing that Specialist Voss was either remarkably naive about what she was doing or deliberately playing innocent while conducting unauthorized activities. "The quantum encryption servers aren't part of satellite communications, Specialist. Any access to those systems requires specific authorization that's well above your clearance level." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Aria had been caught accessing classified systems that her cover identity had no legitimate reason to approach. Her cover story about conducting routine diagnostics had just collapsed, leaving her with seconds to decide how to respond to 8 Marines who now viewed her as a confirmed security threat. Morrison stepped directly behind her chair, close enough that she could feel his presence as a physical pressure. "I think it's time you explained exactly what you're doing, Specialist Voss, and this time let's skip the story about following standard procedures." Aria's tactical assessment shifted into high-speed analysis. 8 Marines, all experienced combat veterans, positioned to contain her movement and respond to aggressive action. Multiple exit routes, but all controlled by personnel who suspected her of espionage. Weapons available, improvised options from office equipment, but nothing that would allow her to neutralize 8 targets without significant risk. Most critically, her data extraction was now 85% complete. The evidence she needed to expose the quantum encryption breach was almost within her grasp, but obtaining it required another 3 minutes of uninterrupted access to classified systems. "Sir, I may have made an error in my diagnostic routing," Aria said, allowing her voice to show increasing stress while she continued typing. If I've accessed unauthorized systems, it wasn't intentional. Perhaps someone could guide me through the correct procedures. Wheeler had been watching her screen closely enough to recognize that her typing patterns didn't match her verbal explanations. She's not making errors, Morrison. Those access attempts are deliberate and sophisticated. Someone with her supposed training level couldn't execute those procedures accidentally. Torres moved to activate the security communication panel, preparing to summon additional Marines and potentially base security personnel. Should I call this in, Sergeant? If she's conducting unauthorized intelligence gathering, this becomes a counterintelligence matter. The moment of decision had arrived. Aria could continue her extraction for another minute, but doing so would force the Marines to take direct action that would expose her mission and potentially compromise 3 years of deep cover operation. Alternatively, she could abort her intelligence gathering and attempt to extract from Camp Redstone using her emergency protocols, but that would mean losing the evidence needed to stop the quantum encryption breach. Morrison's hand moved toward the emergency stop button that would immediately terminate all computer access in the communications center. Last chance, Specialist. Either explain what you're really doing, or we shut down your access and conduct a formal security investigation. Aria's data extraction reached 92% completion. The final 8% contained the identities of the Marine officers involved in the security breach and communication logs that would expose their external coordinator. Losing that information would mean months of additional investigation and continued compromise of America's most advanced encryption technology. She made her choice. Instead of stopping her activities or attempting to explain her actions, Aria accelerated her data extraction while simultaneously preparing for the physical confrontation she knew was about to begin. Her training had prepared her for exactly this scenario, maintaining an intelligence operation under direct threat while positioning for tactical response. "I'm almost finished with the diagnostic," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard with speed that could no longer be disguised as nervous technical competence. "Just need another minute to complete the analysis and generate the report you requested." Brooks reached toward her keyboard to physically stop her activities, and in that instant, everything changed. Aria's hand intercepted his wrist with a precision grip that immediately immobilized his arm, while her other hand continued typing. The movement was so fast and professionally executed that it took the 7 other Marines a crucial second to process what they had just witnessed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Ma'am, release Corporal Brooks immediately," Morrison commanded, his voice carrying the authority of 12 years of military leadership. Aria's data extraction reached 100% completion at the exact moment Brooks tried to break free from her restraining grip. Her mission was complete, but her cover was irrevocably blown. 8 Marines now knew that communications specialist Aria Voss possessed combat skills that were completely inconsistent with her supposed background. The 45 seconds that would shock the entire military establishment were about to begin. The moment Brooks felt Aria's grip immobilize his wrist, his military training kicked in with automatic precision. He attempted a standard defensive countermove, twisting his arm to break free while simultaneously calling out to alert his fellow Marines. What happened next defied everything he understood about the nervous communications specialist they had been investigating. Aria released Brooks's wrist and stepped backward in a fluid motion that seemed almost casual until Morrison realized she had positioned herself at the exact center of the communications center, equidistant from all 8 Marines and with clear sightlines to every potential threat. Her posture had changed completely. Gone was the uncertain technician, replaced by someone who moved with the predatory grace of a trained fighter. "Gentlemen," Aria said, her voice now carrying none of the nervous uncertainty that had characterized her speech for 3 weeks. "I suggest you step back and allow me to complete my work here." Morrison's combat instincts recognized the transformation immediately. The woman standing before them was not the same person who had fumbled with equipment diagnostics and asked hesitant questions about military protocols. This was someone who understood tactical positioning, threat assessment, and combat dynamics at a level that exceeded most of the Marines in the room. "Negative specialist," Morrison commanded, using his authority as senior non-commissioned officer present. "You will step away from the computer and assume a prone position with your hands visible, now." Hamilton and Torres moved to flank Aria's position, their years of military experience guiding them into a standard containment formation. Wheeler maintained his position near the communication equipment while Foster secured the primary exit. Martinez, Brooks, and Chen closed the perimeter, creating an 8-person containment that should have been more than sufficient to control one communications technician. Aria's response was immediate and devastating. She moved toward Hamilton first, her approach so quick that he barely had time to raise his hands before she executed a textbook arm drag that used his own forward momentum to send him crashing into a bank of communications equipment. The impact wasn't severe enough to cause serious injury, but it effectively removed him from the fight, while demonstrating capabilities that no communications specialist should possess. Torres reacted to Hamilton's fall by lunging toward Aria from her left side, attempting to tackle her to the ground using his superior size and weight. Aria sidestepped his charge with minimal effort, then applied a precise pressure point strike to his neck that dropped him to his knees, gasping and temporarily paralyzed. Wheeler abandoned his position near the equipment and charged directly at Aria, his technical background making him confident in his ability to physically overpower someone of her apparent size and build. She met his charge head-on, deflecting his grasping hands and delivering a palm strike to his solar plexus that folded him over in breathless agony. Foster had been moving toward the exit to prevent her escape, but when he saw 3 of his colleagues neutralized in less than 15 seconds, he reversed direction and attempted to tackle Aria from behind. She sensed his approach without turning around, dropped to one knee to avoid his grasping arms, then swept his legs in a move that sent him sprawling across the floor. Martinez, Brooks, and Chen attacked simultaneously, hoping that coordinated assault would overcome whatever training Aria had received. Their strategy failed catastrophically. Aria flowed between their attacks like water, using their own aggression against them with techniques that belonged in special operations training rather than communications school. She caught Martinez's punch in a joint lock that twisted his arm into an impossible position, forcing him to submit or risk serious injury. Brooks found himself lifted and thrown over Aria's shoulder in a judo technique executed with perfect form and devastating efficiency. Chen managed to grapple with her for nearly 5 seconds before a pressure point manipulation left him unconscious on the floor. Morrison had been watching in stunned disbelief as his 7 colleagues were systematically dismantled by someone they had dismissed as an incompetent technician. His 12 years of Marine combat experience had never prepared him to witness such a complete reversal of tactical expectations. When Aria turned toward him, her breathing barely elevated, despite having just neutralized 7 trained Marines. He realized he was facing someone whose capabilities far exceeded anything in his experience. "Sergeant Morrison," Aria said, her voice calm and professional, "I strongly recommend that you remain where you are and allow me to finish my work." Morrison's pride and military training warred with the practical recognition that Specialist Voss, whoever she really was, had just demonstrated combat skills that surpassed his own. Around him, 7 Marines groaned in various stages of recovery from techniques that had been applied with surgical precision to disable without causing permanent injury. "What the hell are you?" Morrison demanded, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and confusion that replaced his earlier authority. "Someone who really needs to complete this diagnostic," Aria replied, turning back to her computer terminal. Her casual dismissal of 8 Marines was perhaps more shocking than the combat techniques she had used to neutralize them. Morrison made the decision that military protocol demanded, despite the evidence that Specialist Voss could probably defeat him as easily as she had handled his colleagues. His responsibility to base security required that he attempt to stop whatever unauthorized activity she was conducting. He moved toward her with the measured approach of someone who had learned to respect his opponent's capabilities. Aria didn't turn around, but her body language indicated awareness of his approach. When Morrison was within arm's reach, she spoke without looking at him. "Sergeant, I have successfully extracted evidence of unauthorized access to the quantum encryption project by Marine personnel at this base. The security breach you're concerned about is real, but I'm not the perpetrator. I'm the solution." Morrison paused, his tactical assessment suddenly complicated by the possibility that Specialist Voss might actually be conducting legitimate counterintelligence work. "If that's true, then identify yourself properly and provide authorization for your activities." "I can't do that without compromising an ongoing classified operation," Aria replied, finally turning to face him. "But I can tell you that the real security threats at this base are about to be exposed, and your interference is jeopardizing national security." The communications center had fallen silent except for the groaning of Marines, slowly recovering from their encounter with capabilities they had never expected to face. Morrison found himself in the impossible position of having to decide whether to trust someone who had just demonstrated that his entire understanding of the situation had been completely wrong. Before he could make that decision, alarms began sounding throughout Camp Redstone, indicating a base-wide security alert. Through the communications center's windows, Morrison could see military police vehicles racing toward their building, responding to automated alerts triggered by the unusual computer activity Aria had been conducting. "Well," Aria said, saving her extracted data to an encrypted drive, "it appears our conversation is about to become significantly more complicated." The 45 seconds that had changed everything were over, but the consequences were just beginning. The military police vehicles screeched to a halt outside the communications center as Aria completed her data transfer, the evidence of the quantum encryption breach now secured on an encrypted drive that she slipped into a concealed pocket of her uniform. Through the reinforced windows, she could see at least 12 MPs establishing a perimeter around the building while additional personnel moved to secure all exit points. Morrison struggled to his feet, his training warring with the surreal situation he found himself in. 7 of his Marines were in various states of recovery from their encounter with someone they had assumed was a nervous technician, while alarms continued to blare across Camp Redstone. The woman responsible for this chaos stood calmly at her workstation, apparently unconcerned about the overwhelming response converging on their location. "Military, police, building is surrounded. All personnel exit with hands visible." The amplified voice from outside carried the authority of base security protocols being implemented at the highest level. Aria assessed her tactical situation with the clinical precision her training had ingrained. 12 MPs outside, at least 6 more likely positioned at strategic points around the building, potential helicopter support within minutes if this escalated to a manhunt scenario. Most critically, she had completed her primary mission. The evidence needed to expose the quantum encryption breach was secured and ready for transmission to Colonel Thorne's team. "Sergeant Morrison," she said, her voice carrying a calm authority that seemed incongruous with their circumstances. "In approximately 30 seconds, military police are going to enter this building and find 8 Marines who appear to have been assaulted by a communications specialist. I strongly suggest you prepare an explanation that serves everyone's interests." Morrison's tactical mind raced through the implications. Standard military police procedure would involve immediate detention of all personnel present, extensive interrogation, and a formal investigation that would expose whatever classified operation Specialist Voss was actually conducting. If she was telling the truth about working on legitimate counterintelligence, such exposure could compromise national security assets. Hamilton had recovered enough to speak, though he remained seated against the communications equipment where Aria's arm drag had deposited him. "Morrison, we need to decide right now whether we're dealing with a security threat or a friendly operative. Because if MPs find us like this without a coherent explanation, all of our careers are over." The sound of boots on concrete outside indicated that the military police entry team was in position. Wheeler, still breathing heavily from his encounter with Aria's palm strike, voiced what several of the Marines were thinking. "How do we explain that one person took down 8 of us without breaking a sweat?" Aria moved away from her workstation, positioning herself where she would be clearly visible when the MPs entered, but not in a threatening posture. "Gentlemen, you have about 15 seconds to decide whether you want to be part of the solution or part of the problem. I can guarantee that my authorization will be confirmed within the hour, but your cooperation now will determine how this situation develops." Torres, still recovering from the pressure point strike that had temporarily paralyzed him, managed to stand with assistance from Foster. "What kind of authorization allows someone to operate under false identity and assault Marine personnel?" "The kind that prevents foreign intelligence services from stealing technology that could shift global military balance," Aria replied matter-of-factly. "The kind that's classified at levels that require presidential approval." Morrison made his decision as footsteps approached the communications center entrance. Military police protocol demanded that he report the incident exactly as it occurred, but his growing suspicion that Specialist Voss was conducting legitimate intelligence work made him choose a different course. "Listen up," he called to his 7 colleagues, his voice carrying the command authority they had learned to respect. "When MPs enter, our story is that we discovered Specialist Voss conducting advanced diagnostic procedures and requested demonstration of her capabilities. Any injuries resulted from training exercises to assess her qualifications for advanced technical assignments." Brooks, who had been first to experience Aria's defensive capabilities, looked skeptical. "Morrison, they're going to ask how training exercises left 8 Marines looking like we went through a blender. Because we underestimated someone whose capabilities exceeded our expectations," Morrison replied firmly. "It happens in training situations when assumptions prove incorrect." The communications center door burst open as 6 military police officers entered in tactical formation, weapons drawn and ready to respond to whatever threat had triggered the base-wide security alert. The scene that greeted them was confusing rather than immediately threatening. 8 Marines in various states of dishevelment and 1 communications specialist standing calmly near her workstation. "All personnel assume prone positions with hands visible," the MP team leader commanded, following standard protocol for unknown threat situations. Aria complied immediately, lowering herself to the floor with smooth precision while keeping her hands clearly visible. The 8 Marines followed suit, though their movements showed the careful stiffness of people nursing recent injuries. "Sergeant Morrison, report status," the MP team leader demanded, recognizing Morrison's rank and apparent authority among the group. Morrison delivered his prepared explanation with the confidence of someone accustomed to briefing superior officers under pressure. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was called away for emergency briefing. "We conducted assessment of Specialist Voss's technical capabilities and discovered that her training exceeded standard parameters. Requested demonstration resulted in training exercise to evaluate her qualifications for advanced assignments." The MP team leader's expression showed skepticism as he surveyed the communications center. Overturned furniture, scattered equipment, and 8 Marines who appeared to have been in a significant physical altercation didn't match the description of a routine training exercise. "Sir," one of the junior MPs reported, "base security detected unauthorized access to classified systems originating from this location. Multiple protocols were triggered, indicating potential security breach." Aria remained prone, but spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "I have authorization for those system accesses. My credentials can be verified through Pentagon channels using authentication code Nightingale 77 Alpha." The authentication code had an immediate effect on the MP team leader, whose expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. Nightingale protocols were known only to personnel with specific counterintelligence clearances, and anyone unauthorized to use those codes would face charges that could result in decades of imprisonment. "Ma'am, remain in position while we verify that information," the team leader instructed, activating his secure communication device to contact base command. The next 20 minutes passed in tense silence as military police maintained their positions, while confirmation of Aria's authorization worked its way through classified channels. Morrison and his Marines remained prone, each processing the realization that their investigation of a suspicious communications specialist had somehow intersected with a classified operation that operated at levels far above their clearance. Wheeler was the first to voice what they were all thinking. "Morrison, what the hell did we just stumble into?" Before Morrison could respond, the MP team leader received confirmation through his secure channel. His demeanor immediately became more professional and significantly more cautious. "Specialist Voss, you're authorized to resume normal position. Pentagon confirms your authentication and directs that this incident be classified under Nightingale protocols. All personnel present are advised that discussion of these events outside authorized channels constitutes violation of national security statutes." As Aria rose from the prone position, the 8 Marines who had attempted to investigate her found themselves bound by classification requirements that prevented them from discussing the most extraordinary combat demonstration they had ever witnessed. Their failed security assessment had become a national security matter that would follow them for the remainder of their careers. Morrison realized that communications specialist Aria Voss had just transformed from suspected security threat to confirmed intelligence operative, and his Marines had become unwitting participants in whatever classified mission she was conducting. The 45 seconds that had revealed her true nature were about to change everything at Camp Redstone. Within 3 hours of the communications center incident, Colonel Thorne was aboard a military transport aircraft heading toward Camp Redstone, accompanied by a team of Pentagon intelligence specialists and legal advisors who had been briefed on the unprecedented exposure of Project Nightingale. The secure communication from base command had been brief but alarming. Mockingbird cover compromised during confrontation with 8 Marine personnel. Operational security breached. Immediate intervention required. General Patterson received the initial report at his Pentagon office and immediately convened an emergency session with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The implications of Aria's exposure extended far beyond a single, compromised operative. Project Nightingale represented a fundamental shift in intelligence gathering methodology, and its premature revelation could undermine years of strategic planning. At Camp Redstone, Aria found herself in a secure briefing room normally reserved for classified operations planning, facing Colonel Richards, the base commander, and his senior intelligence officer. The encrypted drive containing evidence of the quantum encryption breach sat on the table between them, its contents representing both the success of her mission and the catastrophic exposure of her cover identity. Specialist Voss, Colonel Richards began, though his tone indicated he understood that wasn't her real name. Your authentication codes have been verified at the highest levels, but your methods have created a situation that requires immediate damage control. 8 Marines witnessed combat capabilities that are inconsistent with any known military training program. Aria maintained her professional composure despite the knowledge that 3 years of careful identity construction had been destroyed in 45 seconds of defensive action. Sir, I completed my primary mission objective. The evidence on that drive will expose a security breach that has compromised the quantum encryption project for at least 6 months. Colonel Richards examined the drive without touching it, understanding that its contents were classified beyond his clearance level. That may be true, Specialist, but we now have 8 Marines who can testify that a communications technician neutralized all of them using techniques that don't exist in any official training manual. Military police reports, medical examinations, and witness statements are all creating a paper trail that will be impossible to suppress. The base intelligence officer leaned forward, his expression showing the concern of someone who understood the broader implications. Ma'am, within the past 3 hours, rumors have begun spreading throughout Camp Redstone about the incident in the communications center. Despite classification orders, personnel are discussing what they've heard about a female Marine taking down 8 colleagues in hand-to-hand combat. Aria recognized the classic intelligence problem of containing information that had already achieved critical mass in military gossip networks. Soldiers talked, especially about events that challenged their fundamental understanding of military hierarchy and capabilities. The story would spread through unofficial channels regardless of official classification orders. "What's the recommended response?" Aria asked, though her training had already provided her with several scenarios for this exact situation. Colonel Richards consulted a secure tablet that had been provided by Pentagon Communication. Colonel Thorne is en route with instructions from the Secretary of Defense. Preliminary guidance suggests that maintaining classification is no longer viable given the number of witnesses and the scope of their observations. The implications of this statement settled over the briefing room like a weight. If Project Nightingale could no longer operate in complete secrecy, the entire program would need to be restructured or potentially terminated. Aria represented years of investment in developing deep cover operatives whose effectiveness depended on absolute anonymity. Morrison and his 7 Marines had been sequestered in separate briefing rooms where they were being interviewed by military intelligence personnel. Each interview followed the same pattern: detailed documentation of what they had observed, assessment of their reliability as witnesses, and evaluation of their security clearances for potential briefing into classified programs. Hamilton provided the most technical assessment of Aria's capabilities, his infantry background allowing him to recognize that her combat techniques belonged to special operations training rather than standard military instruction. Wheeler's technical expertise let him confirm that her computer activities had involved sophisticated penetration of classified systems that required advanced training and authorization. Torres, still nursing soreness from the pressure point technique that had temporarily paralyzed him, offered perhaps the most telling observation. "Sir, whoever she really is, she could have seriously injured all of us, but chose techniques that neutralized without causing permanent damage. That level of precision suggests training that's way beyond anything I've seen in 12 years of Marine service." Each interview confirmed that Aria's cover identity was irrevocably compromised, but they also revealed something unexpected. The 8 Marines had developed a grudging respect for someone who had demonstrated capabilities that exceeded their own while maintaining professional restraint under extreme pressure. Morrison's interview was the most crucial, as his leadership role among the group made his assessment carry significant weight with military intelligence evaluators. "Sir, I've served with Marines in 3 combat deployments, and I've never seen anyone move like Specialist Voss moved. But more importantly, I've never seen anyone with that level of capability show that much restraint. She could have put all 8 of us in the hospital, but she chose to neutralize without causing serious injury." The interview reports were transmitted to Colonel Thorne's aircraft as he approached Camp Redstone, providing him with detailed assessment of the damage to Project Nightingale's operational security. What the reports revealed was both better and worse than he had feared. Better because Aria's professional conduct had actually enhanced, rather than damaged, military perceptions of her capabilities. Worse because the scope of exposure made continued secrecy impossible. Dr. Sarah Chen, the Pentagon's senior psychologist specializing in military personnel assessment, had accompanied Thorne's team specifically to evaluate the 8 Marines who had witnessed Aria's capabilities. Her preliminary assessment, based on the interview transcripts, suggested an unexpected opportunity within the crisis. "Colonel," she briefed Thorne as their aircraft began descent toward Camp Redstone, "the Marines who encountered your operative show remarkably consistent reactions. Rather than feeling humiliated or resentful about being defeated, they express professional admiration for capabilities they recognize as exceptional. Their testimony actually validates the effectiveness of your training program." Thorne studied the interview summaries, recognizing the psychological dynamics Dr. Chen had identified. Military personnel respected competence and professionalism, especially when demonstrated under pressure. Aria's restraint during the confrontation had actually enhanced her credibility rather than damaged it. "What's your recommendation for managing this exposure?" Thorne asked. "Limited disclosure," Dr. Chen replied immediately. "Use this incident as proof of concept for advanced training programs. Don't reveal the full scope of Project Nightingale, but acknowledge that exceptional capabilities exist within military special operations. Frame it as innovation rather than deception." As Colonel Thorne's aircraft touched down at Camp Redstone, Aria was completing her mission debrief with base command. The quantum encryption evidence had been verified as authentic and comprehensive, providing detailed documentation of unauthorized access, patterns that would lead to arrests within days. "Your intelligence work has been exemplary," Colonel Richards acknowledged, "but your exposure has created challenges that will require innovative solutions." Aria nodded, understanding that her career as an invisible operative was over, but her value to military intelligence might actually be beginning a new phase. The 45 seconds that had revealed her true nature had also demonstrated that Project Nightingale's training methods produced capabilities that commanded respect rather than suspicion. The transformation from hidden asset to acknowledged specialist was about to begin. Colonel Thorne's arrival at Camp Redstone triggered a cascade of high-level briefings that would reshape not only Aria's future, but the entire approach to military intelligence operations. Within 6 hours of his landing, a secure conference room had been established with direct communication links to the Pentagon, where Secretary of Defense Harrison was monitoring developments in real time. The briefing began with Colonel Richards presenting the complete incident report, including medical examinations of the 8 Marines, technical analysis of Aria's computer activities, and preliminary damage assessment of the operational security breach. What emerged was a picture of an intelligence operative whose capabilities had been so thoroughly exposed that continued covert operations were impossible. "The quantum encryption evidence is comprehensive," Richards reported to the assembled group. Specialist Voss successfully identified 3 Marine officers who were unknowingly compromised by external handlers, documented 6 months of unauthorized system access, and traced communication patterns back to a sophisticated espionage network operating across multiple military installations. General Patterson, participating via secure video link from the Pentagon, leaned forward as the implications became clear. "Are you saying this security breach extends beyond Camp Redstone?" "Affirmative, sir," Colonel Thorne confirmed, consulting classified reports that had been generated from Aria's intelligence gathering. "The quantum encryption project has been systematically compromised at 4 different installations. The evidence suggests a coordinated operation directed by foreign intelligence services with unprecedented access to our most classified technologies." Secretary Harrison's voice came through the secure communication system with unmistakable authority. "Colonel Thorne, your operative has uncovered what appears to be one of the most significant intelligence breaches in recent military history. That success needs to be weighed against the exposure of your classified program." Aria sat at the conference table, no longer maintaining her communications specialist persona, but not yet authorized to reveal her true identity or background. The conversation was determining not only her future, but potentially the viability of Project Nightingale as a whole. Dr. Chen presented her psychological assessment of the 8 Marines who had witnessed Aria's capabilities. Secretary Harrison, the personnel involved show remarkably positive responses to the encounter. Rather than feeling threatened or suspicious, they express professional admiration and curiosity about advanced training programs. Their reactions suggest that limited disclosure might actually enhance rather than compromise operational security. The strategy session that followed involved officials whose clearance levels required presidential authorization. Aria found herself at the center of a decision-making process that would influence military intelligence policy for years to come. The question wasn't just how to manage her exposure, but whether Project Nightingale should transition from complete secrecy to limited acknowledgement within military circles. Morrison and his 7 Marines had been brought together in a separate briefing room where they faced their own moment of decision. Colonel Richards addressed them with unusual directness about their role in what had become a classified incident of national significance. "Gentlemen, you've witnessed capabilities that represent years of specialized training and significant investment in advanced military programs. Your discretion regarding these events is not just requested, it's essential for national security." Hamilton raised his hand with military courtesy. "Sir, are we being asked to pretend the incident didn't happen, or are we being briefed into whatever program Specialist Voss represents?" The question highlighted the fundamental challenge facing military leadership. 8 Marines had observed capabilities that couldn't be explained within normal military training parameters, and their silence couldn't be guaranteed without some form of official acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. Wheeler voiced the technical concerns that his background had identified. "Colonel, the computer activities we observed involved system penetration techniques that aren't taught in any communication specialist program. if Specialist Voss has legitimate authorization for those activities, then she's operating under cover identities that represent significant classified programs. Torres, still processing his encounter with pressure point techniques that had temporarily paralyzed him, offered a soldier's perspective. Sir, whoever she really is, she demonstrated capabilities that could revolutionize military training. Are we going to pretend that level of effectiveness doesn't exist? The 8 Marines had unwittingly become the test case for whether military personnel could accept the existence of capabilities that exceeded traditional training parameters while maintaining operational security about classified programs. In the main briefing room, Secretary Harrison made the decision that would transform both Aria's career and the future of Project Nightingale. Colonel Thorne, we're implementing controlled disclosure protocols. Your operative's cover is blown, but her demonstration of capabilities provides an opportunity to acknowledge advanced training programs without revealing their full scope. The plan that emerged was elegant in its simplicity. Aria would be officially reassigned to a newly created Advanced Capabilities Development Unit tasked with evaluating and implementing innovative training methodologies. Her exceptional abilities would be acknowledged within military circles as proof that specialized training could produce capabilities that exceeded standard parameters. This allows us to maintain operational security about Project Nightingale's true scope, while providing credible explanation for what 8 Marines witnessed. General Patterson explained via video link. It also creates cover for future operations by establishing precedent for acknowledging exceptional capabilities within military special operations. Dr. Chen outlined the psychological benefits of the approach. By framing this as innovation rather than deception, we transform potential security liability into strategic asset. Military personnel will view advanced capabilities as goals to achieve rather than threats. To investigate. Aria spoke for the first time since the briefing began, her voice carrying the professional confidence that she had hidden for 3 years. Sir, this approach could actually enhance operational effectiveness. If military personnel understand that exceptional capabilities exist within our training programs, they are more likely to support rather than investigate unusual performance. Colonel Thorne nodded approvingly. The invisibility that made you effective as a covert operative becomes a different kind of asset when channeled through official acknowledgement. Instead of hiding exceptional capabilities, we use them to inspire and intimidate. The final phase of the plan involved bringing Morrison and his Marines into limited briefing about advanced capabilities development programs. They would become the first military personnel outside classified circles to be officially acknowledged as witnesses to capabilities that represented the future of military training. When the two groups were brought together, Aria faced the 8 Marines who had unknowingly ended her career as a covert operative while potentially launching her transformation into something unprecedented in military intelligence. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying authority that none of them had heard during her 3 weeks as a nervous communications specialist, "you've demonstrated something important about military effectiveness, the willingness to investigate anomalies rather than ignore them. That instinct makes you valuable assets for advanced training evaluation." Morrison stepped forward, speaking for his group with characteristic directness. "Ma'am, we still don't understand exactly who you are or what program you represent, but we recognize professional competence when we see it. If there's a way for us to contribute to whatever mission you're actually conducting, you have our support." The transformation was complete. Aria Voss, the invisible operative whose cover had been blown by 8 suspicious Marines, was about to become the visible face of military capabilities that would redefine what soldiers believed possible. The 45 seconds that had ended her covert career had begun something entirely new. 6 months after the communications center incident, Aria stood before an auditorium filled with military personnel from across all service branches, her uniform now bearing the insignia of Major Aria Voss, Director of Advanced Capabilities Assessment. The transformation from invisible operative to public advocate for revolutionary training methodologies had exceeded everyone's expectations, including her own. The Advanced Capabilities Development Unit had become one of the most requested assignments in military special operations, attracting personnel who wanted to push beyond traditional performance limitations. What had begun as damage control for a blown cover operation had evolved into a comprehensive program for identifying and developing exceptional military capabilities across all service branches. Morrison, Hamilton, Wheeler, Foster, Torres, Martinez, Brooks, and Chen had become the program's first official graduates, their encounter with Aria serving as proof of concept for training methodologies that produced capabilities military leadership hadn't believed possible. Each had been promoted and reassigned to positions where their enhanced skills could benefit broader military operations. Ladies and gentlemen, Aria began her presentation, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who no longer needed to hide her abilities. 6 months ago, 8 Marines discovered that their assumptions about human performance limitations were incorrect. Today, we're here to discuss how their discovery is revolutionizing military training across all service branches. The audience included generals, admirals, and senior enlisted personnel who had come to understand that the incident at Camp Redstone represented more than an unusual training accident. Video footage of Aria's defensive techniques, captured by security cameras in the communications center, had become required viewing for military leadership seeking to understand the potential for human performance optimization. Colonel Thorne sat in the front row, his expression showing satisfaction with how the crisis had been transformed into strategic advantage. Project Nightingale continued to operate in complete secrecy, but its training methodologies were now being adapted for broader military application through the Advanced Capabilities Program. The invisibility that had once protected covert operatives was being replaced by visibility that inspired military personnel to exceed their own expectations. General Patterson addressed the audience via video link, his words carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed the transformation firsthand. Major Voss represents proof that human performance capabilities extend far beyond what we previously considered achievable. The training methodologies she's developing are producing results that are reshaping our understanding of military effectiveness. The presentation included detailed analysis of the 45 seconds that had changed everything. Slow-motion footage showed how Aria had neutralized 8 trained Marines, using techniques that maximized efficiency while minimizing injury. Military kinesiologists had studied every movement, identifying principles that were being incorporated into training programs at installations worldwide. Dr. Chen presented psychological research demonstrating that military personnel responded positively to evidence of exceptional capabilities within their own ranks. Rather than feeling intimidated or threatened, soldiers and Marines showed increased motivation to achieve higher performance standards when they understood that extraordinary results were possible through proper training. The most significant finding, Dr. Chen explained to the audience, is that acknowledgement of exceptional capabilities creates aspirational rather than suspicious responses among military personnel. When soldiers understand that their colleagues can achieve extraordinary results through specialized training, they want to achieve similar capabilities themselves. Morrison stepped to the podium to represent the 8 Marines who had become inadvertent catalysts for the program's development. His testimony carried special weight because of his direct experience with capabilities that had challenged everything he thought he knew about military training. "Sir, ma'am," Morrison addressed the audience with characteristic directness. "6 months ago, my Marines and I thought we were investigating a security threat. What we discovered was that our understanding of human performance was limited by our own assumptions rather than actual physiological constraints." His presentation included video testimonials from Hamilton, Wheeler, and the others, each describing how their encounter with Aria had motivated them to pursue training that had dramatically enhanced their own capabilities. The psychological transformation was as significant as the physical development. Personnel who believed exceptional performance was achievable consistently outperformed those who accepted traditional limitations. The program's success metrics were unprecedented in military training history. Personnel who completed advanced capabilities assessment showed performance improvements that exceeded baseline measurements by margins that previous research had considered impossible. More importantly, their enhanced capabilities were being demonstrated in operational environments where they provided tangible tactical advantages. Aria concluded her presentation by addressing the broader implications of what had begun as an accidental exposure of classified capabilities. "The incident that brought us together taught us that human potential extends far beyond what we previously believed possible. Our mission now is to help military personnel understand that exceptional performance isn't reserved for a select few. It's achievable by anyone willing to challenge their own assumptions about what they can accomplish." The standing ovation that followed lasted nearly 5 minutes, but Aria's attention was focused on a message that had appeared on her secure communication device. Intelligence reports indicated suspicious activity at military installations in Europe, suggesting that foreign intelligence services were attempting to duplicate the capabilities they had observed through leaked footage of the Camp Redstone incident. Colonel Thorne approached as the audience dispersed, his expression showing the mixture of pride and concern that characterized his relationship with Aria since her transformation from covert operative to public figure. "Outstanding presentation, Major, but we've received intelligence that suggests your visibility has attracted attention from adversaries who want to understand how you achieved those capabilities." "Expected development," Aria replied, her tactical mind already processing the implications. "Our success was bound to generate foreign interest in replicating our training methodologies. The question is whether they'll attempt intelligence gathering or direct recruitment," Thorne continued. "Your public profile makes you a high-value target for kidnapping or coercion attempts." Aria smiled with the confidence of someone who had spent years operating in hostile environments. "Sir, after 3 years of maintaining cover as a nervous communications specialist, dealing with foreign intelligence operatives should be relatively straightforward." Their conversation was interrupted by Morrison, who approached with news that would reshape their assessment of the developing threat. "Major Voss, sir, we've received reports that personnel matching the description of the quantum encryption conspirators have been observed near advanced capabilities training facilities. They may be attempting to infiltrate our programs." The revelation added new dimensions to Aria's transformation from invisible operative to visible target. The same capabilities that made her valuable as a training instructor also made her a strategic asset that foreign intelligence services would attempt to compromise or eliminate. As evening fell over the military installation where Aria now conducted her official duties, she reflected on how 45 seconds of defensive action had completely transformed her career and potentially the future of military training. The invisibility that had once protected her as a covert operative had been replaced by visibility that inspired military personnel while attracting threats from adversaries who sought to understand or neutralize her capabilities. Her secure communication device displayed a final message of the day, originating from classified sources that confirmed her analysis. Foreign intelligence services had initiated operations specifically targeting advanced capabilities development programs. The woman who had once operated undetected in hostile territories was about to face enemies who knew exactly who she was and what she represented. Major Aria Voss, formerly the invisible operative known only by her codename, prepared for the next phase of a career that had been redefined by 8 Marines who had refused to accept that things were always what they appeared to be. The 45 seconds that had ended her covert operations had begun something far more significant and far more dangerous. The game had changed completely, but Aria was ready for whatever came next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.